Hello, and welcome to the Pricing for the Planet podcast, the podcast that explores the intersection of business and sustainability. Today, I'm super excited because we are going to talk about a brand new concept that will change the world of pricing and the world of sustainability. We will talk about true pricing. So, Michel, we have a tradition in this podcast. We start from the end. What would be the key message you would like the audience to take away from this podcast episode?
There's no reason to wait with working on the true price of your products, your services. We don't have to wait for politics. We don't have to wait for anyone else. Just do it. Calculate the true price and improve your true price. Start right now.
Perfect. I love that. So, Michel, can you introduce yourself and explain a little bit more what is a true price concept?
Yes. So I'm the director co-founder of Impact Institute and True Price. We are approximately 100 people strong in Amsterdam, and we work all over the world in making the true price of products and integrating that information into investment decisions into companies. And what it entails is that if you take the current market prices, there's costs that are incurred but not accounted for. Think, for example, of climate change that has significant costs to society through the loss of yields, through the destruction of infrastructure due to extreme weather events. But also take, for example, pollution, the intoxication of nature, the loss of species. But also on the social side, think of exploitation of workers, the underpayment and under-earning and the poverty. All of those societal costs are not shown into the market prices. And therefore, when you have a transaction in markets, those costs are not considered. And that leads to a very perverse and problematic situation that no one likes. That is that exploitation and extraction and pollution is cheaper than having a decent functioning market. And that is a big penalty for all of those entrepreneurs and all of those consumers that try to do a decent thing through entrepreneurship. And that is what true pricing ultimately wants to end. True pricing is showing and improving those true prices in order to have a truly sustainable market.
I love that. I love the concept. So congrats for doing that. Can you
Thank you.
share maybe how did you come up with this concept? Like, how did you discover that? What's your journey?
Yeah, so in the late 10th, 2010 or so, my good friend Adriaan de Groot Ruiz, who's an econometrician by training, a former PhD in sustainable finance, and myself, we basically kind of started this endeavor, and we found out that actually the problem of externalities were not solved. And externalities in economics is that there's cost to society external to the transactions, also benefits. But in the case of costs, the problem is obviously that we have unsustainable markets that extract so much that the future potential for value creation is undermined, and that future generations, but also people who are not involved in those transactions themselves, suffer. And that is very inefficient. All the economists agree. There have been Nobel Prizes already in the late 20s of the previous century awarded on this concept of addressing externalities, but there was no actual framework, no method, and also no implementation program to address this. Why were we so triggered? For myself, I was a teenager when I wanted to contribute to alleviating poverty. I did kind of philanthropic fundraising. I had 6,500 euros, which was a lot of money that I wanted to that I collected with my community, and we wanted to donate to farmers in Ghana who suffered from a lack of sanitation. And those were actually cocoa farmers. And what I noticed later is that they were not by chance in poverty. No, they actually contributed to the chocolate bars in our stores, but did not get sufficient price to get by. So they were underpaid. And that was something that was due to trade limitations. If they would export raw beans, they would have a cheaper export price than when they would actually export the end product that is a bar that has much more added value. But they would get penalized through a tariff. And that was very perverse. That on the one hand, we have these development corporation, which kind of donates billions of euros from France, from Germany, from the Netherlands to many of these producing countries. And at the same time, we have trade arrangements that kind of have extractive or exploitative prices. So when I entered and at university in a think tank and I met Adrian, I and this idea came up. I was completely begeisterd. I felt this is the mission for my life. It's a very useful and meaningful endeavor. If we would have all the prices in markets as a true price, there would no longer be this, in my view, dependency industry of aid. There would be actual fair entrepreneurship, people producing things that are of value, and people consuming that, and at the same time not kind of incurring cost to society. And then markets can actually function well. So that is a kind of a brief history in how we embarked upon this. Like myself, I'm a sociologist or social researcher by training. I love to do deep analysis and deconstruction of markets, and to really kind of trace down that actually prices are a construct, and that is formed in accounting frameworks at the International Financial Reporting Standard Foundation, or that it is shaped through taxes, the taxes that you all pay as VAT or tariffs. It's all landing into prices. So for me, it's very fascinating to trace that down and to try to improve that. And Adrian, he's a brilliant economist, and he can do the detailed calculations. And now we have approximately 5 PhDs in the field of mathematics, physics, and all sorts of other quantitative fields, working on the method for over a decade. And we've been developing this into data and implementing this all over the world. And that's how it originated, actually.
And perfect transition, because my next question was, do you have example of companies leveraging this concept of true pricing?
Definitely. The first company that actually was seriously considering to work with us was the chocolate company Tone Chocolonely. It's quite a disrupting brand, a impact enterprise originating in the Netherlands, but now active globally. I think they do more than 150 million euros of chocolate sales all over the world. And when they were relatively small, that was 2012 or so, over a decade ago, they sent us an email, and we were already, hitting the drum and telling the story of a true price, and marketeers thought we were crazy, right? If you increase the price, marketeers think you push consumers away. Um, Lawyers, they think you are against competition because they think it's a cartel. You are agreeing on prices. And entrepreneurs, especially those from the more traditional American enterprise schools or MBAs, they say it's communism because you are centralizing, dictating the price of products. So we were not making a lot of waves with our first kind of drums. But then we received an email from Tony Chocolonely, and the sustainability person there, he said, I don't really get how you calculate it, but we need to substantiate our claims. We want to go towards slave-free chocolate, and we noticed from research that there's so much people forced to work in the cocoa fields. Can you help us with quantification so that we can make clear to our consumers that we are actually making progress? And then we said, well, yeah, we can, but unfortunately, there's much more than just this form of exploitation through enforced labor. There's also underpayment, under-earning, unhealthy and unsafe working conditions. But also on the environmental side, we have pollution, we have use of toxics, we have the extraction of scarce water, emission of carbon gases, and that all has also negative consequences. And you do need to incorporate that, and then you are actually sustainable. And we did so. We did the calculations in a few months, and we presented this to the CEO of that company. Henk-Jan Beltman in those days. And actually, we were quite nervous because this was already a enterprise that tried to do better in terms of their sustainability. And we came up with an additional challenge. Despite them having fair trade cocoa beans, they still had poverty. And it was, in a way, certifying poverty. So it was inconvenient to present this to their CEO. But against our expectation, the CEO said in 20 minutes, we have to transfer an additional 1.5 million euros to alleviate those farmers with their yield out of poverty on average. And you still have farmers who, don't have sufficient yield and therefore remain poor. And unfortunately, companies cannot solve everything, but on average, you can actually do more. So they added much more to the procurement budget, and they communicated twice to their consumers that, well, thanks to True Price, they have to increase their price twice. And that was something that was welcomed. And also, in contrast of what marketeers were expecting, they sold more bars. They were actually in no time the fastest growing chocolate bar in the Netherlands and outperforming other chocolate brands, because what we then observed was that consumers actually care. They do want to have a sustainable product, but they require a bit more information about how it's consumed, a strong story, and the data to back it up.
That's really impressive, and I think it's a very good illustration of what we say at Pricing for the Planet, which is our society is still using 19th century concept like markups and traditional pricing methodology, and everybody needs to change and to adopt those new what we call 21st century concept. And typically true pricing is exactly what we are talking about when we talk about 21st century concept. So really interesting.
Thank you.
And Michel, do you have any example of smaller companies maybe which adopted your concept?
Definitely. We have many dozens, if not hundreds of companies using this
Right.
into their daily operations. Well, let's zoom into those companies that use it into their purchase points, because that is very interesting, right? That you actually take it all the way to your consumers. And at the actual point of transaction, you show what is the actual difference between the current market price and the true price. And what is interesting about that, and we have I think right now 40 purchase points in the Netherlands, large caterers of, for example, the government, which has thousands of transactions a day for lunches, for smoothies, all sorts of that kind of items, food items, and they show what the true price is. Now, what is the advantage of that? Is that if you compare two similar sandwiches, and one has a vegetarian kind of meat, and the other has and it's plant-based, based on soy or other kind of plant-based proteins, and the other one has a beef kind of slice on the bread, you see that the actual soy-based alternative is much cheaper, and you do see some consumers jumping to that alternative purely on the basis of transparency. Now, what you also can do is to have voluntary true pricing, and that is something we do also on a relatively larger scale. What you do there is that you either, and there's three options, you can actually have the true price as the default and the market price as the, call it, alternative. And then what you see is a remarkable 95% conversion towards paying the true price. So only 5% of the consumers opt out for a kind of market price. And that is not so weird, because people are very norm sensitive. In billions of or millions of years of evolution, the one of the there's a lot of evolutionary pressure on being norm sensitive to human species members, simply because that is using collective intelligence. If you do what your neighbor or the other groups in your community do, since they are alive, it's likely that you also survive, right? So there's a lot of evolutionary pressure on norms. And therefore, in the case of a default true price, you see a massive conversion. Now, there's another way to do it, and that is something you can consider, and many companies do that. For example, the largest retailer in the Netherlands, Albert Heijn, they have 40% market share in the Netherlands, and they have actually in the Delhaize group in Belgium supermarkets. They have also a large presence in the US. They're one of the larger retailers in the world. And they have actually introduced in 3 locations the kind of mandatory choice. So you can either pay the market price or you can pay the true price. And what we saw there for coffee, and this was cappuccino, macchiato, all sorts of espresso, all sorts of coffee combinations with milk and plant-based milk and coffee. Coffee with a origin from, I think it was Brazil and Ethiopia. It was a mix. And what you saw there was that people actually there was a 20% conversion at the introduction, and that actually lowered to 15% kind of steady state conversion. So it was significantly lower, but nonetheless very impressive to see that there was such a big conversion of people who actually were willing to pay more. Now, what is the actual gap that they were willing to pay for? For a cup of coffee that would retail for €2, if you would pay for the true price, I think it was €2.08 for an espresso, €2.20. I think it was for a lot of. I need to figure out what the exact numbers were, but I think it was €2.20 something for a coffee with milk, and even more for coffee with cow-based milk. So yeah, you could also, just by choosing a more sustainable option and paying the market price, make a more sustainable choice. And many people were willing to pay more and to kind of take responsibility for the societal cost. Well, and this is just another example. There's also a supermarket in Amsterdam for 3 years now that has adopted mandatory true pricing for the fruit, vegetables, and bread, and they are now rolling it out to all the other food categories. According to the entrepreneur, there was an increase of sales of 5% after the introduction, which is also quite a good score. And that was because he felt that he was able to convey stronger the story of what he stands for. And he has many local farmers not so far away that provide the goods to his supermarket. And when you buy that, let's say broccoli, you pay the true price, and that is added to a fund, and that fund is used to remediate those costs, to clean the soil, to compensate for the carbon emitted, and to pay farmers more. So this is just to illustrate, this is a movement that has already gone through the test of scaling. And what was very remarkable is in Germany, that was last summer, there was an experiment by Penny Supermarket. And Penny is part of Rewe. And that is not a, sustainability oriented brand. It is a brand that is for the masses. And actually, it's a price fighter, right? This is a discounter in Germany. And they implemented true pricing in 2,150 locations in whole Germany. And that was for 2 weeks long a true price experiment. Now, why did they do that? Obviously, because they want to actually make a statement and, make kind of the discussion about the prices that people pay, make it, clear that that is not sufficient to address all the social and environmental costs. They introduced that for cheese, for meat, and let's say a handful of products. And what they noticed is that there was a significant drop of meat consumption, not surprising.
Yeah.
And there was a actual drop of organic meat consumption as well, but that drop was less. So you saw a kind of relative shift from conventional meat to organic meat, which is a good thing because, well, first of all, there's an overconsumption of meat, and meat has significant negative impacts on biodiversity and on carbon. And secondly, well, organic meat is better. So it's not bad that there's a relative shift towards kind of organic meat. And what they also saw is that at certain locations, there was an increase of sales of plant-based alternatives. I think it was a 5% increase or so. Now, that was something that I think is an actual very useful and a good contribution. Unfortunately, the supermarket was a bit unpleasantly surprised that people were shying away from buying those kind of meat products. And therefore, they, to this date, discontinued this experiment. But nonetheless, it shows that true pricing can work at a very large scale, and that it also actually achieves the shift in consumer spending, which is actually the ultimate logic of true pricing.
That's awesome. And so, if anyone is interested to implement true pricing, where should they start? Where should they go? Like, how can they, start this journey?
Well, yeah, I mean, the simple answer is just go to trueprice.org and get in touch, and we can see how we can help. We try to make it as accessible as possible. We build an open access true price methodology, which is basically based on global average assessments of what are the external costs for different, let's say, footprints. So for example, if you use a liter of water for a carrot that you bring into the store, you can use that database to say, okay, that is then an equivalent of, I don't know, 50 cents of environmental pollution in a certain scarce water pond. So these are things we've provided, and you can download it. It's still pretty technical, but those experts, in organizations, they can rely on that and can use it, and it's used quite large for by many researchers. It has also been published in many scientific publications. Ourselves, we have in Nature Food 2 publications on the subject. We worked with the United Nations Food Systems Summit, have a very big report on this for the global food system. You also have in the US with the Rockefeller Foundation, they used parts of our methods for their calculations on the US true cost of food. And so that is used by technicians, scientists to make these assessments. So it's open access for the smaller companies or those who aren't an expert. Yeah, I think just see what's out there already. Base your policies on and we do beyond food, by the way. So for example, air travel. There's publications where you can draw those numbers, and it's in the same order of magnitude. If you fly from Charles de Gaulle to New York, it's not so different from flying from Paris to New York, right? So from Schiphol to New York. So you can kind of get I call it first estimate. And yeah, we are willing to provide refinements and helping organizations. What you then do, you basically first show what is the actual activities of an organization. You trace down the whole value chain of a product, whether it's a diaper for children or babies that has these super chemicals that absorb lots of water, but they're actually quite toxic, and in landfills pollute the soil, pollute the groundwater. You have to kind of all from the origin, the petrochemical origin of it, all the way to the landfill and everything in between, and you have to account for that. What is the steps? Secondly, you see what is then the cost to society in terms of footprints. You can use LCA, life cycle analysis, for that, and see what's paid to farmers, or what is the negative impact on local communities. And then thirdly, you value that in a monetary term and say, what is the cost to remediate that? What is restoration, compensation, and prevention costs? And then you have a order of magnitude. We call it the invoice to nature, or the invoice to people who are exploited. And that is something you can then add to the product. And then you come up with an order of magnitude, which is fit for purpose in many transactions, and then you can actually systematically take responsibility for your external costs and truly design a sustainable product.
Awesome. And what I really like with what you said, it's like the traditional, price elasticity is not working like it used to. And you can increase your price while gaining market share, while driving more volume. So nobody can say anymore, like, I don't want to use true price because it will penalize my business. Actually, not in all cases, but in some cases, if you do it right, you can actually drive volume to your business.
Yeah, and we take transparency very serious. So there's no reason to not use true pricing, because you can also just make it transparent. We shouldn't be blind to the concerns of entrepreneurs that they price themselves out of the market. I mean, we believe in that concept. That's the whole idea of true pricing in the first place, is that it is perverse and it's countering the sustainability movement that, the cheaper products and the more unsustainable products win in markets today. And so we
Michel, a huge thank you again. It was fascinating. Thanks again for sharing all those great information. And people, if you want to continue the journey with us, you can follow us, www.pricingfortheplanet.com. And I just wanted to thank you for your time, your attention, and your engagement towards sustainability. Be well.